Wednesday is here. Who is ready for Wednesday? Who's already off to a good start? Who's got something positive to share? Martin, that comes into my head every morning when we get just a whole lot of nothing. Everybody had their coffee? Are we good to go? Come on.
It's Wednesday. It's dreary. Come on.
It's dreary. Yeah, we might actually get a little bit of rain in the Northeast here today. Well, I am. I'll share just a little bit of a win for me. Obviously, health and wellness is a big focus in my life right now, and really making sure I'm eating right, trying to exercise adequately, and trying to recover properly. And I found a really good podcast on recovery. That's just talking about the different modes of recovery and the different modes of training. And with all of us being, or not all of us, but most of us being type A kind of drivers. And you may recognize it when I say it, but just hearing it from a doctor, I think makes it a little bit more palatable, makes it stick a little bit more. But it's not just the physical activity, at the gym that's going to drain us each day. It's if you're a type A and you're constantly doing stuff, your body is kind of never getting into that relaxation mode, right? So it's the kind of doing tasks all day. And then even, when you think you might be relaxing, but you're really like scrolling, even there, you're not in complete shutdown mode, right? So physical activity is draining you. You're just day-to-day tasks. If you're standing versus you're sitting, there's a little bit of drain there. So you could think, hey, I'm taking advantage of every minute of the day. I'm constantly exercising. I'm standing versus sitting. But maybe you're never actually getting into recovery mode. So there's a fine balance there. And then the third piece is this the psychological stress that is draining the battery. And all of these things throughout the day are going to affect kind of the biggest recovery piece, which is your ability to sleep well. And I've definitely noticed that. I mean, my nighttime routine, I'm so dialed in. I don't think there's anything more I can do to it. And yet some nights I'm still waking up at 2 o'clock and I got a 2 hour window that I'm just staring at the ceiling, thinking about stuff, jotting stuff down. After listening to this podcast, I really think it has to do a lot with never truly shutting down. Best analogy I heard, and I'll end with this, was, if you think about the evolution of our bodies, and you're out in the wild and you're trying to elude a predator, you might elude them for a little bit, but if you kind of, right, until you're going and you're fatiguing and you're draining your energy, but you're alert and you're awake and you're trying to get away, and then you get into a little bit of a safe spot, right? I don't know. Let's say you're up in a tree and you realize that this animal can't get up the tree. So you're a little safe, but you're not completely safe. You still can't go into full relaxation mode, right? And so if at that point, if you're thinking about your day to day, if you're kind of safe, but there's still stuff that's going on in your life and you're in that tree and we equate that to a night's sleep, you might fall asleep in that tree, but it's a light sleep because you got to be ready just in case something else is going to come up, right? The difference being if we got into a cave or a room or some other place where you are really completely safe and now you can fully shut everything down and get a full recovery overnight. And when you think about it in those terms, what are all the little things that are still going on in your life? You're in a stressful relationship with your partner and there's bickering there. There's stuff going on at work where, there's stuff going on with a client that you're thinking about and there's a deal that's kind of going awry. Like those little things, it doesn't allow for complete shutdown. And then that was can affect that full recovery at night. So it's interesting, and it's just making me think a little bit more about my daily routine and some of the things that I need to just get really better at with full complete shutdown. because I struggle with it, and I'm sure there are people on this call that struggle with full complete shutdown. And I know as agents, it's difficult. That client might call, that text might come in. But I definitely think there needs to be a time in the day where it's off and you're in full relaxation. Nothing is going to stimulate you and get emotions up, get cortisol levels up, get, that stress factor. Because even just scrolling through social and you see a post that angers you, you were so close to getting into that full recovery mode, and now you're back up. And now that might have just affected your sleep. Right. So what can we do to really nail down and really get into full recovery mode? So I'm not finished with it. I'm sure there's some tactics. I'm sure meditation will come up as a form of really shutting it all down. But anybody want to comment on this? Margareta?
Morning all. So something I actually used for my daughter was when kids have a hard time going to sleep, and I've used it for myself, is imagine a big bucket when you're in bed and you can't fall asleep, and just dump everything into that bucket, open the closet door and put the bucket into the closet. It'll be there tomorrow. Try that.
No, that's definitely a strategy of just having a pad and writing everything down before you go to bed. This is all the stuff that's on my mind. Get it all out. It's definitely a good strategy. Get that stuff off of your mind. I think, after listening to this podcast and seeing the science behind it, if you haven't prepared yourself all day, or at least in the second half of the day, I think you can write all that stuff down, because I do it, right? And you can still find yourself waking up and it's just not fully flushed out of your system. So, and there's going to be days, right, where we're just nothing you can do about it. If your shutdown time is 7:30 and the client calls at 7:25 and you got a deal that's a mess, unfortunately, I think that is a night where maybe your sleep is going to be affected. So,
I was told no TV in your bedroom, because that also, gets you going. And I've done meditation. And that would put me right out when I was in a very stressful situation. And then just like some kind of background noise I do, I used to do on my Alexa is like brown noise or some kind of noise, and that, just puts me right out.
good. Yeah, I think the other thing with the white noises white noise machines, or if you're just using your iPhone, it's just there could be little noises throughout the night. And if you are in a light sleep and you didn't get into those deep stages, those things can wake you up, and then you might struggle to fall back asleep. Whereas if you had a white noise machine going, that little dog barking from the neighbor or something maybe gets drowned out. It doesn't wake you up, and you're able to sleep through the night. So, having the right environment with the blackout shades and no electronics and no TV and the white noise and the temperature is right. All of those things do matter. And if we're looking at, hey, I want to have the best life I could possibly have, I think it really starts with energy and being energized and ready to go every day. And without that, I think it's going to be difficult for you to have your best life. And before you can have all that energy, it starts the day before. And how recovered are you? Anybody else want to contribute? Martin.
I always say there's two things. Sometimes, like I've mentioned this before, you got to also that shit, as I like to say, just let it go. And my other one is, and pardon my French, I call it the fuck it bucket. Just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Just let it go and put it in the bucket, and it's gone. Just don't do what my wife did. She's talking to her boss, and instead of saying fuck it bucket, she goes, "You got to fuck the bucket." I'm like, "No, honey, it's fuck it bucket. You don't fuck the bucket."
All right. Well, wasn't expecting that this morning, but thank you for that share, Marty.
Happy to do it.
Good. Anybody else want to switch over into real estate? Anybody got something weird going on a deal that'd be a good share? I had a couple of things come across my desk yesterday. And I don't know if any of you guys are or have come across this yet, but if you have, would love to hear how you handled it. Which is, you've got a lead, and you find out that they've signed with another agent because they had to in order to see a house, but they really aren't wanting to move forward with that other agent. Anybody come across that yet? You've got a lead. Hey, have you signed anything? Yep, I did. But I just want to see a house and they made me sign it. How are we handling those? Martin?
Actually, I had that happen. Was it Saturday? It was a Zillow lead I got from you guys, and she's, I kind of mentioned, we have to sign the buyer's agreement, blah, blah, blah. We made 2 appointments, and they were just hesitant to sign. So I'm like, hey, I kind of dug deeper. What's going on? This is, don't matter which agent you use. And they already had a deal with this agent, and it fell through. And it seems like she won't let them out of the contract. So I guess we're still working on it and trying to get them out of the contract, where to me, if she screwed up on a deal, it should be pretty, self-explanatory. She can do her job correctly. So.
Yeah, I think I don't think it should be handled any different than, you've got a seller that is got a listing agreement and they're not happy with their listing agent. Right. The reality is we don't want to interfere with the contract. And I think that it's a standard language, which is, hey, look, first of all, you need to understand the length of your contract, right? Listing agreements typically a little bit longer. With the new buyer agreements, we know, hey, you should really just check your agreement and see what the term was. Was it for a day? Was it for a week? Was it for 6 months? Was it for just a single property? You might have signed for 6 months for one property. And that's no problem. That is your agent for that property for the next 6 months. But we're free to work together on all other properties, and we can come up with our own timeline, right? So getting them to really, hey, you should take a look at that agreement and see what you really agreed to. At the end of the day, if you agreed to more than what you wanted to, and you're not happy with the services, you should really talk to your attorney about what your options are. Right. We don't want to be coaching them or giving them legal advice on what they would need to do to get out of that buyer's agreement. But the reality is that if somebody's not holding up their end of the bargain, Martin, like you said, they should be able to get out of an agreement. Right. Hey, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. You didn't do X, Y, and Z. I want to get out of this agreement. So anybody want to add anything to what I'm saying, or hey, I ran into this scenario and I'm just curious how you would have handled it, or Margaret?
So about that, particularly about something in the contract is also that we are holding on that they're designated to us for like so many days. I just recently took some training, and they said that a lot of times, if we put like, let's say 180 days and we only sign up the contract for a week, that technically we cannot do that, that it has to be proportional for past how many days we do. So I guess my point is that if somebody has signed for 1 week for a particular property, but they put in, you still owe me for 180 days into it, it's not proportional, therefore it's not legal, because that's how it was explained in this class. I don't know if you guys heard of this. There's has to be a certain balance to that contract on how much that person would owe you, commitment to it.
So I haven't heard this, but this does seem to make sense. I don't know that proportional would be the right word. To me, would be reasonable, right? So is it reasonable to say, like, I showed you a property, I took time out of my day, matter of fact, I showed it to you twice, we made an offer on it, if you end up buying, but we have an agreement for one property for 3 months, right? And then I've got the 180 days post that. I mean, it seems reasonable. I mean, I worked on this property. Like, if you do end up buying this in the reasonable future, I would think that, a court would see that as reasonable, right? I did all this work, and then let's say, it's a week contract or something. And then, so you're saying, okay, well, reasonable post would be 30 days. That means if a month and a half later you buy that house, I'm not owed anything. that doesn't sound reasonable to me. So I don't know the legalities. I don't know if anybody else has taken a class or could speak to this one.
So we've always used 180 days on all of our contracts. And it was something that we ran by legal before we picked the number of 180 days. So I don't know who was running that class, Margaretta, but it's something that I would look into. I think that everything in the majority of states, some laws for real estate are pretty black and white. And I mean, they're not very black and white. They're definitely open to interpretation. So when you hear reasonable, anyone can just assume that reasonable means something specific because they use it often. I don't think that there's an issue with, putting the 180 days in there, because to me it is reasonable. Like, we did do work, right? So I will dig deeper into it because it's definitely interesting. But as far as I know, initially when we first started creating our documents, we did call, and that was the number that was given to us.
So there was a class through Massachusetts Board of Realtors, Mar. It was actually the buyer's specialist designation. So the trainer is very well, like, established trainer. So, I would imagine that she'd be pretty right on. And I was like a little bit surprised by that because I've never heard of that concept before, really. So,
Again, I really think that some of it is just open to interpretation, because I'm actually friends with one of the MAR trainers, and she had said something in a class a couple of years ago, and I reached out to her and I was like, can you tell me where this is? And she's like, well, it's not really anywhere. It just basically means. So the way that I look at that is it's open to interpretation. But I'll call legal. I'll look into it.
Yeah, I think the key thing we're trying to figure out here, KB, is it proportional or is it reasonable, right? Like, that would be what we're looking to distinguish here. Great question, Margaretta. Who else has got something? Martin.
I just have a question about what we were just talking about. Like, I understand the proportional part. I'm thinking it's almost like if you take a lease to court, like most leases are one-sided. Like, this contract is really one-sided if you think about it. And that's just my question. Is it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it's one-sided. If you're just saying I'm looking at for one property, that doesn't seem very one-sided to me, right? You're just agree. Now, if you're signing somebody up for 6 months and then a year after the 6 months, and it's for any the North America, that's pretty one-sided, right? So I think you got to look at the terms. What's reasonable with the client?
Yeah, none of our contracts are one-sided contracts. They're both double-sided, and it's because there is duties for each party that you're agreeing to in the contract. So, like, there are broker service duties in an exclusive representation contract, as well as buyer representation duties. So it's an agreement of a partnership.
I think maybe the last real important piece to this is making sure that we understand how we deliver the message to somebody when they tell us they are under contract is really important. Okay, we don't ever want to just be like, hey, well, if you cancel that, then we can work together, right? Like, that's crossing the line. But like Steve had said, maybe review the terms of that contract, right? And then any questions can go to an attorney if you're not happy with the terms that are in it. Or, unfortunately, I cannot work with you while you are under contract. If for any reason that does change it, I'd be happy to help. Right? So just being really careful that we don't cross the lines of how the message is delivered.
Yep. Advising them to look at the terms. I think it'd be okay to explain, what typical terms would be. Hey, there could have been a length of time. There could have been geographic territory that you've agreed to. So I would review your agreement, see what you agreed to. And if you're not happy with what you agreed to, or you don't believe the other side is holding up their end of the bargain, then I would just talk to the attorney that you plan on using for your purchase to take a look at it and see what your rights are. Who else has got a scenario going on that would be a good share for the group? Who learned something on a recent deal?
Well, I have one more question on this. So if there's an agent that is working, say, like in New York, but isn't licensed in Massachusetts, can a buyer work with both?
Yeah, 100%. A buyer could work, you could have one agent for Springfield, another agent for Northampton, another agent for Westfield, right? Like that's the way these contracts could read. Hey, this is the territory, right? You're my specialist in Northampton, but I'm also looking in Westfield, and I don't feel like you know that Westfield market. I've got a friend that really knows Westfield, and I'm going to use them in Westfield. So even within a state, within an area, you could say, I'm working with you for condos, and I'm working with this person for multifamilies. I'm working on with this agent in Agawam for land, and I'm working with another agent in Agawam for houses. Right? Like we can break these contracts out any way that we want to. And I think kind of that's where it's going, guys. Like when we're trying to get a buyer to agree to work with us, why should I work with you? What is it that you do really well? Where are your areas of expertise? What's your geographic territory that you feel comfortable servicing me? Right? Those are the things that you're going to need to be able to sit down with somebody and explain why they should work with you. Because I do believe as the buyers become more educated, that question, you're not just using Johnny's mom, because your son's soccer team mom that happens to have a license moving forward. When you have to sign on the dotted line that you are going to pay the commission if it's not worked into the deal, I think you're going to start to ask some more questions. And I think the industry does shrink and get more professionalized, which, like I said, for the people on this call is great news. It is so much easier working with other agents that know what they're doing. More deals will stay together. We've already heard from people on this call how it's just nicer to just know I'm working with this client, not potentially showing them houses for the next 6 months, hoping that I get paid. Who else has got something on the deal? What do you guys got going on? Somebody must have learned something yesterday. What'd you learn? We had a situation come across my desk here. It says what to do when the buyer won't move forward and then the buyer doesn't want to sign the termination, releasing the deposit to the seller. All right, so I'm assuming this is a scenario where the buyer wants to back out post, like let's say they want to back out for inspections, but they're post their inspection contingency period. So they want to back out of the deal. They want their deposit back. Seller says, no, you're past your date. And what do we do? Because the buyer will not sign that termination. What do we do?
I was gonna wait for somebody else to chime in, but we have the option of sort of separating release of deposit and termination. A lot of people don't realize that, so we could terminate that contract without agreeing to releasing of the deposit right away. Okay, so that way, all parties can sort of move on. The seller can still work on selling their home. The buyers can still work on purchasing another property while sort of the dispute of the deposit is figured out between the parties. Okay, so that's a good option. I mean, having, another conversation if they're not willing to sign anything unless they get their money back, a deeper conversation with both sides. Hey, they are backing out, or maybe we're really not that far, we're a day or something past, or they're just not giving a good reason. Do you really want to hold this up on your side over $1,000? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really our best option, right? Is to try and just separate those things out. The reality is, when I was running my previous brokerage, When I departed, I want to say we were holding deposits on like 6 different transactions that we've been holding for years. They're just sitting there, and the parties could not agree on who was going to get the money. The money just sits in that escrow account until somebody sues somebody or they can agree to something. It was crazy to me that they couldn't agree to just split the money, or you just got 2 stubborn people and the money would just sit there. But yeah, we, as the broker, money in escrow, we cannot do anything until both parties agree on how that money is going to get distributed. Does anybody have any questions on that? Pat?
I don't really have a question. I know like 6 months ago in the chat, I asked, are people just giving all the deposit money all at once, or are they breaking it up? I always break it up because I got burned right when I started in the industry on a deposit. It took like, I don't know, 2 months to get the lady's deposit back. And we had given like both deposits. So the purchase and sale deposit and the upfront, binder right away. So it was like $7,000 that they were holding up. We couldn't make any other offers. So I always make sure that I only give the small deposit and then and then I always schedule purchase and sale outside of the inspection contingency to make sure we're through that to give the bigger deposit. And I found when I break deals down now, like if a deal has to be terminated, it's a lot easier to get $1,000 back than it is to get 7, right? So I'm wondering if people are actually doing that, or if they're still just giving both deposits all at once up front, because my argument was exactly what I just said, and other people's argument was like, no, I just give the whole thing all at once.
No, so first of all, just some clarity here. There are other markets where you're not even able to do this, right? It is just straight to purchase and sale and straight to a full deposit. So we're in a unique situation where we've got offer and then purchase and sale where you can kind of do this. I think most of our other markets, you're going right to purchase and sale and you're going right to full deposit. So that's the first thing. And then Margaret, I'll let you comment.
I have to do it. Sorry, guys. Back in the day, before cell phones, people would send out a copy of $100 bill. I had to do it. No, so all seriousness, I mean, people were, I think, just like Steve says, right to the point. It's our market. And you guys remember, back in the day, well, not even that long ago, we would do the deposit of like $1,000 or something, but then it got so competitive over the past few years. We're like, we're giving you $10,000 deposit. Go get us, So I think the market is shifting now, obviously. So we're getting a little bit more lenient with all that. That's my thoughts on that.
I think it's a great point. I think markets definitely have an impact on the size of the deposits, when the deposits get made, if they're refundable or not. Right. So I think it's a great comment. As markets start to shift, buyers could become in more control. You'll get my deposit when you get my deposit versus here's my deposit. I'll have it to you on the first day. It's, 5% of the deal. Right. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, standard deposit used to be 5% of the deal. That's $25,000 on a $500,000 house. I think we've seen in general deposits kind of come down a little bit. Not across the board, but in general, I think we've seen the deposits come down a little bit. Anybody have any other comments, questions around deposits? Anybody want to just directly answer Pat on their thoughts on, the 2 deposits if you're in a market that has the 2? Jen.
I wanted to ask a question. So if you are in a situation where your buyers are supposed to close and now you find out the night before closing that there's an issue with the title and the sellers wanted to do a holdback, the attorneys wanted to do a holdback. They agreed to it. They never told the agents that there was any issue whatsoever. And then they find out last minute that the seller does not want to do that. So now the closing is getting delayed because it's a title issue. I mean, we still want to close and everything, but I'm just thinking about it as far as the deposit. If it didn't work out, because the seller, because of the title issue. Because it's a title issue, would your buyer still get their deposit if they ended up not moving into the property? They should be getting their deposit back, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. If when you read these contracts, a clear title is a performance obligation of the seller. If the seller is not able to do that, deposit would be returned in full. Yep. Yeah.
Isn't there typically, it's usually in the purchase and sale, it outlines how much time they have as well to try to clear the title properly. I think it's 30 days or something like that. So, I guess the holdback is the holdback part of it, but like it usually says term as well as an amount of money. So it'll say like the seller has 30 days and can spend up to $2,000 trying to get the title cleared. And you're kind of stuck at that point as the buyer, because if you've signed purchase and sale, you've agreed to give the seller that much time if the title issue comes up. So you kind of just have to wait it out.
Yeah, I think you're accurate there, Pat. I think most of the contracts, if not all of them, do have additional language in with the title that the seller is to be given a period of time to try and clear it if some sort of an issue comes up. Great questions. Awesome. All right. The goal for today is full recovery for tomorrow. I want you guys coming to this call like a ball of energy with so much positivity and some great shares. So work on that recovery today. Appreciate you guys, and we'll get after it again tomorrow morning. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.